Welcome to episode 34 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on May 28th, 2020. Today I'm going to finish up telling you about the Manos de Uruguay alpaca heather. A lot has been going on in the knitting world that we need to cover, and I actually did something for the Master Hand Knitter program. Shocking, I know. Music as always, let's get started. First, many thanks go out to Eva, Edwina, Diane, Angela, Michelle, and Joan for coming on board as patrons over the last couple of weeks by visiting patreon.com/I-thought-I-knew-how. You all are wonderful. Patrons make a monthly contribution to help defray the costs of producing the podcast, and they receive bonus materials and experiences in return. Thank you to all my patrons. Also, a bunch of you went over to iTunes over the last couple of weeks and left starred reviews. Thanks so much for doing that. Extra thanks go out to Spinning Buddy and Woolly Tamales for leaving kind comments with your reviews. Rating and commenting on the show helps to improve its standing in search results in iTunes so more people can find it. So that simple action really does do a lot. Thank you. Okay, let me start off today by finishing up the review I started of the Manos de Uruguay alpaca heather. If you remember from last episode, I had finished the shawl, but I hadn't had time to block it, and I was nervous about how the alpaca content was going to affect the yarn in the blocking process. Alpaca tends to grow longer over time, but the alpaca heather is only 30% alpaca and the rest is wool. So the mystery was whether that was enough wool content to help the piece retain its shape and not start stretching immediately. As I washed the shawl, I gave it a warm water soak in a large glass baking dish with a few drops of dish soap, and I was extra careful as I drained the water and added rinse water and then drained that to keep the shawl all held to one side with no bits drifting away in the direction of the draining water. I pressed as much water as I could out of the shawl by pressing it against the side of the pan and was extra careful to lift it as a bunch and arrange it carefully on the towel so I wasn't pulling at anything. The yarn calls for a US 2.5 to 4 needle, and the Racha shawl pattern is knit with a US 6, so it's already not as supported as the yarn could be. I did the normal thing I do where I lay the shawl out on a towel and roll it up and step on it to press the water out before taking it down to the basement to pin out on some rubber mats. As I was pinning it out, it felt much drapier than the 100% wool I usually use, which is to be expected. But I did feel like I had to be careful with it as I pinned it out because the weight of the remaining water in it, it did want to, I wouldn't say stretch. I would say it wanted to flop wider than I wanted it to. That said, I was able to sort of smush it back to the proper dimensions and get it all pinned in place. And then the next morning when I went down to get it, it had dried completely. And that feeling that it was wanting to grow was gone. The finished blocked fabric drapes beautifully. It's a bit more fluid in its movements than a 100% wool shawl. And I don't really feel concerned about it stretching. So I would say that overall, I quite like the Manos de Uruguay alpaca heather. Just know that you'll need to be more mindful of it when it's wet, that you are giving it proper support to keep it from flopping around on you. This was my first project using German short rows. I know there are lots of different methods for short row shaping out there. All the patterns I've used that have involved short rows to this point in my life have used the wrap and turn method. I have been known to not do certain patterns because I hate dealing with the wrap and turn method. But the German short rows were quicker and easier, and I love them and will possibly just substitute this method anytime I see a wrap and turn suggested ever again. To work a German short row, you get to where you need to turn and work back. You turn your work, bring the yarn to the front, and then slip the last stitch that you knit purlwise from your left needle to your right needle. And then you're going to take your working yarn over your right hand needle to the back of your work. This isn't just a simple transfer between the needles like you're switching from holding the yarn like you're going to purl to holding it like you're going to knit. You aren't transferring it between the needles. You're transferring it over the right needle, and you're doing it a little aggressively so that the stitch you just knit and then transferred back to the right needle basically disappears, and the stitch below it gets pulled up and over the needle so that it looks like there are 2 loops where there had been 1. Then you continue working the row back to the start. When you then knit over that short row where you have those 2 loops, you knit them both at the same time, and that's it. It's much easier for me to look for that odd stitch made up of 2 loops than it is to look for the wrap, and you don't have to struggle to get that wrap back up on the needle to knit it. You just knit the 2 loops and carry on. It's very clever. It's quick and easy. There's no sign of it in the finished work. I really love them. German short rows, you are my new favorite. Let's have a song. And guess what? It's not May Klingler today. I don't know what the weather has been like where you are, but it's decidedly summer where I live now, and I've got a suitably upbeat song to match the season. I was first drawn to the song because it's called Ska na Ska, which is a Filipino construction you use when you want to say something is a lot. So if I want to say someone is very cute, I would say they are cute na cute. Or really, I would say buti na buti or pogi na pogi. So I thought maybe this was a song by a Filipino artist, but you'll hear it's just part of the chorus. This is Louis Yolin and Stefan Letronik with Ska na Ska. Enjoy.
Whatever happened to your little bow? She said Jackson is in the tent packing. We're heading up to Reading to Eli Low. Na 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 na, da da do da day. We're going to the party, celebrate today. Now purple beats, teenage dreams, falling to the street with so sharp Noah's Ark and dream.
Okay, so the Online International Fiber Festival was a lot of fun, and I was eagerly planning the next incarnation of the event. I had to put off picking the dates for a bit, but I finally got those settled on and announced. And the following day, BluPrint sent an email to all their teachers to let them know that they are shutting down. The company has since made a statement on their website saying that they plan to close up shop over the next couple of months. Those who have paid for specific classes will be allowed some way to download them to keep them. Those of us who paid for subscriptions will be refunded a prorated amount based on when they actually close up shop. This is incredibly frustrating, to be honest. There are a handful of other craft education sites out there, but at this point, they lack the depth and breadth of information that is presented in the BluPrint classes. That said, I can't imagine that this service will truly disappear. In early April, the National Needle Arts Association announced that they would no longer be running their trade show. I say their trade show, but it was really the trade show for the industry. There are several bloggers out there who have written up reasons why they think this collapse happened, and it's not all due to COVID-19. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Lots of theories began to swirl about how or if the trade show would occur in the future. Taking it online would remove the opportunity to network, which is one of the major benefits of a trade show, as well as removing the ability for designers and store owners to actually touch and try the products to decide whether to work with them. There is still very much a need for industry professionals to meet in person, but who had the ability to take on such a major event? And then just the other day, about 6 weeks after the announcement that the trade show was no more, XRX, the group behind the Stitches events, announced that they will be running an industry trade show going forward. The first one will run in Atlanta in May 2021, in the days before their normal Stitches event that's already scheduled for May in Atlanta. There is still a demand for an industry trade show. Just because one organization was not successful running it doesn't mean the demand is gone, and someone did step in to fill the void. I think we are going to see the same sort of thing happen with BluPrint. I can see the issue being resolved in several different ways. BluPrint is currently owned by NBC Universal. They may sell it whole hog to another presence in the industry. Would XRX take this on too? The current CEO of BluPrint and the current CEO of XRX are actually, in fact, cousins. That might help grease the wheels for that particular solution. Or perhaps one of the major yarn manufacturers would take it on and create kits for the classes using their supplies. As I mentioned, there are other crafting education platforms out there who are growing their class offerings. Acquiring BluPrint would take care of that in one fell swoop. There have also been people like Shannon Oki, who runs Cooperative Press, who has made a public decree that she would love to work something out with the BluPrint teachers if they are able to retain the rights to their shows. So I think that, like the trade show, there is still a demand for these high-quality courses, and there are likely quite a few people who can see ways to manage the business side of it better. Whether the dust will settle or not before the next online International Fiber Festival is yet to be seen, but I am optimistic. In the meantime, I am continuing to plan other parts of the festival, and I'm binging my way through the BluPrint classes I've been wanting to take as quickly as I can, in the slim chance that it really does just disappear. By the way, the dates for the next online International Fiber Festival are November 9th through the 16th. If we get to the end of June and there doesn't seem to be a resolution on the horizon for the BluPrint classes, I'll start seeing what I can do to find an alternative source for instruction. I have settled on the countries. I have a wish list of vendors. I even have a class list drawn up. Now I'm focusing on planning the day's events and menus. I am not reaching out to any of the vendors or announcing the countries until things are more settled with the instruction, though, so just sit tight and I'll keep you updated. As if that is not enough of a shakeup, Vogue Knitting has made a statement that they are bringing on a new editor. Norah Gaughan will be stepping in with a new team. At the same time, they are cutting the number of issues to 2 per year, but they have the goal of returning to 3 issues per year in the future, which they say is their original publishing schedule. Norah has been working as a designer for decades now, creating collections for yarn companies, publishing designs in knitting magazines, and authoring some of the best-known pattern books out there, including Knitting Nature and the Knitted Cable Sourcebook. She has a gift for creative shaping and eye-catching patterns that you not only want to wear, but are within the reach of an average knitter. Frankly, I think Vogue Knitting has lost its way a little in this regard, and I really look forward to seeing the issues that are developed under her guidance. Let's talk about Drops Detergent for a minute. Why do I want to talk about them this week? Because I haven't had to think about them for over a month. I'm on the quarterly delivery plan, so my laundry detergent shows up on my doorstep 4 times a year, and I don't have to think about it. It's great. 4 months of detergent for a family of 4 arrives in a box about the size of 2 shoe boxes. How is that even possible? Well, it's because their formulas are super concentrated. You are not paying to ship water. The detergent comes in single-use pods, and 1 pod does a whole load. There is a major brand that shall remain nameless that sells their detergent in pods, and you still have to use 2 pods to clean 1 full load. How wasteful is that? They are still selling you water, taking up space, and making you think you're buying more detergent than you actually are. Your washing machine is full of water. You don't need to be paying to add a few tablespoons more water to it. Drops comes in cardboard packaging too, so you're helping rid the world of single-use plastics. It's just a smart way to buy something we all need. All of this, and the price per load is about half as much as the brand I mentioned earlier. Give them a try by visiting tinyurl.com/drops. That's tinyurl.com/DROPPS, and Drops will make a contribution toward the running of the show. That's tinyurl.com/drops. I wouldn't recommend them if I didn't use them and love them myself. Give them a try. tinyurl.com/drops. You may not believe me when I tell you this, but I actually sat down last night and knit the next swatch for the Master Hand Knitter program, and then this morning I sat down and did the 5th swatch. I know. I am just as shocked as you are. I pulled out the binder last night and had a look at swatch 4 and did a bit of research and spent about an hour knitting and then re-knitting the swatch. Swatch 4 requires you to knit matched bar increases a few stitches in from each selvage edge of the swatch, which does not sound hard at all, and yet I had to knit it twice. First of all, I had to remind myself of a few of the tips I picked up at the start of this exercise, mainly that I needed to avoid the issue of the next to the last stitch of every other row ending up slightly larger than the stitches around it. This happens because as you knit across a row, you push a little bit of yarn along the row with you, and it ends up settling in that next to the last stitch. To avoid it, you knit the first stitch of your row normally, and then the second and third stitch you need to knit very snugly. This makes those 2 stitches a little smaller than the ones around it, and when you knit back over that row, those 2 stitches will eat up that excess bit of yarn that you shift across as you knit. The other bit I needed to remember is to do the same thing on the very last row over the 2nd through the 6th stitches. If you have ever bound off and found that last stitch when you finish binding off to be very large and loopy, you know just how exaggerated the effect of the excess yarn getting pushed across the row can be in a bind off. Working the 2nd through the 6th stitch of the row before very tightly and then finishing the bind off using just the tips of the needles can help that excess yarn settle in before you get to that edge, and you end up with a nice square corner rather than that big loopy flyaway bit. So with that in mind, I started to work the bar increases. Most people, I think, know a bar increase as a knit in the front and back. You start your stitch by knitting through the front loop as you normally would, but before you take the stitch off your needle, you also knit into the back loop, and you end up with a little bar of horizontal yarn to the left of the stitch. So when you're trying to match the look of the increases on each side of the swatch, and say you want the increase to have 5 stitches between that little bar and the edge, then on the right side, you would work the increase into the 5th stitch. But on the left side, you would work the increase into the 6th stitch from the edge because the bar will be sitting to the left. Again, none of this sounds terribly complicated, and yet I had to rework it. You have to work the increase rows a total of 5 times. And after the 4th increase row, I looked back at my work and found that twice I had knit the right number of stitches each time and then knit 1 more before I worked the increase. So 2 of my increases were 1 stitch over from where they should have been. And on one of the plain rows, I'd just thrown in an increase. Just for the heck of it, I guess. I don't even know what I was thinking. I was clearly not giving the swatch my proper attention, but on the 2nd attempt, not only did I get all the increases in the right spots on the rows, but I also knit a little looser overall, so my drape was better than the first 2, and I think it will pass muster with the judges. The swatch I knit this morning was the same idea, only the increases were make ones. Typically, a make one is knit by sort of separating your needles a little bit and lifting the horizontal yarn from the row below up and over your left needle, and then knitting into it either on the front or the back so that the frontmost leg of the stitch will lean either to the right or the left, depending on what direction you want it to slant. And also, as you do it, you're twisting that stitch. But the problem with make ones is that it takes a little bit of the yarn out of the stitch to the right. So you end up with a column of 2 small stitches to the right of your make ones going up your work. To solve this issue, you can instead, in the row before, work a yarn over where you plan to make your make one in the following row. That way, when you work back across your row, you have a spot where the yarn is already up and over your needle, and you can just work into it so that the stitch twists in the direction you want it to lean. There is a trade-off though. With this method, there is a small hole left below that stitch. It's not as large as it would be if you just worked into a yarn over as if you were doing lace, because you are twisting the stitch in one direction or the other. So you have to make a choice about whether you want to deal with the stitch to the right being a little small or the increase to have a little hole underneath it. I personally prefer the look of the little hole, and I hope the judges are okay with that when they see my work. The swatches are blocking now, and this afternoon I will write up the swatch pages for each. There are questions regarding these swatches to be answered, but they relate to these 2 swatches and the next one. So I'm going to have to get swatch 6 knit before I take those on. And that's just one more swatch involving creating and placing increases. But oh my, things are properly moving again. Isn't this a development? Let's have one more song. This one is a dip into country, which I know some people have strong opinions about, but it's a genre I think tends to fit well with summer. And the theme of this song is definitely suited for the season. This is Rebecca Day singing Where the Dirt Runs Out of Road.
Take me where crickets play like a symphony. Sister's driven these streets about 10,000 times. Her memories on these hills like the honeysuckle vines. My footprints can still be found at the creek behind our house. That's where you can find me, sun up, sun down. And that's where my heart belongs. Take me where crickets play like a symphony, where the sweet
A few more things before I go. I have more information for you about the Morehouse Open Farm Day, and because it's going to be online, remember, you can participate no matter where you are. It will be June 6th, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We will get to go on a tour to meet the lambs and sheep that grow the amazing Morehouse merino yarn. We'll get a peek at a secret knitting retreat space. They will share their new hand-painted colorways, and Erin's mom will do her own demonstration for us of how to dye our own yarn. VanessaKnit will make a remote appearance with her son Calvin to show off her Calvin sweater design, which was knit with Morehouse yarn. There will be a new pattern release from Stephanie Cook, and Erin and I will have a chat about the amazing qualities of wool. And she'll also talk about substituting Morehouse yarns in other patterns. The farm day should run about 2 to 3 hours, so pop in and join us. I will put the links in the show notes to the Morehouse site so you can get on their mailing list, as well as a link to the Morehouse Merino Flock group on Facebook so you can keep up to date on developments as the day grows closer. Finally, a reminder that we are changing up the online knit-togethers. June 2nd will be our first day of the new schedule. The time will now be from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The second and fourth Tuesdays will be knit-togethers for patrons at the $5 and higher level, and that will also be from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I realized I needed to have a regular time for our patron knit nights. I keep forgetting to schedule them until about the 15th of the month, and then I just have to figure out a space to fit them in, and that was not working. And I think this way people can just know that they are the second and fourth Tuesdays for patrons and the first Tuesdays for everyone, and we can all plan accordingly. Thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you'd like to support the show, please visit patreon.com/IthoughtIKnewHow to make a monthly pledge, or visit ko-fi.com, that's ko-fi.com/IthoughtIKnewHow to make a one-time donation to the podcast. You may also consider making a purchase from one of our sponsors on the website, IthoughtIKnewHow.familypodcasts.com, where you can also find the show notes for each episode, or you could help out by leaving a 5-star review and kind comments wherever you listen to the podcast, and be sure to tell your friends. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on Twitter, where it's just Thought I Knew How. The groups on Ravelry and Facebook are both called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.